Well, hi everyone, this is Bonnie from the Gertens birding department. Customers in the past 3 weeks have been asking about how do I get rid of those bully birds, the grackles, the blackbirds, the house sparrows, cowbirds, and all of them. Grackles are a type of blackbird, and you can identify them because they've got that kind of navy black head. They've got creepy yellow eyes, which a lot of people don't like, but they have an iridescent, somewhat of a bronze coat or feathers, and they've got more of a fan tail. Grackles come back usually in flocks in the spring. They decimate feeders, they knock seed out, trying to find the seed that they like best. How can you stop that from happening? One of them is take your feeders down for a week or two. When they find out that there are no feeders available, no food, they usually move on. The other option would be, because they're considered, I call them like a 747 of planes, they need a wide landing strip. Unlike a smaller bird, you can use tube feeders, but tube feeders have pegs, and grackles do not like any kind of finch food like Niger. They don't like little tiny canola seeds. They love millet. They love sunflower seeds. They love cracked corn. They love some of this more wasteful food. The problem is you're not going to get cardinals, and so many people want cardinals. How come I'm not getting cardinals? Well, remember this for all your customers that come into the store, cardinals need to face their food. So if you want to just use tube feeders, you're only going to get tiny birds. You're going to get chickadees, house finches, goldfinches, and occasionally you might get a nuthatch on it, but it's a hard shell. They do not like Niger. And the reason is it's a hard shell to crack for them. Even though the seed is so tiny, you might think, well, they can just swallow it. They can't swallow it. They want to crack open a shell. So you can use a tube feeder, or you can change your seed, and that's kind of a big deal. It costs a little bit more, but it's well worth it, especially in spring. So safflower, and we've got different types of safflower here. The first is just your regular white safflower. Grackles and blackbirds do not like this. Again, it's a very, very hard seed to crack. It's got more oils and fats in it. There's only one farmer in the country that grows this. Grackles, blackbirds, house sparrows, they can't crack these seeds. Safflower, either golden or white, they can't crack it. But they do like seed like this. And we sell this, and I understand it's more cost effective for people than our cardinal mix is, but it has the kind of seed that so many of the bully birds love. If you look at these little tiny balls in here, you'll see that's millet. And then you can see there's some cracked corn in there. You'll see a cardinal go onto a feeder and they'll kick this all over the ground. They won't have anything to do with it. So now the bully birds are on the ground and they can clean all that up. That's why you've got bully birds in your yard. Blackbirds love it. Grackles love it. House sparrows especially love it. So the best way to get rid of these bully birds is to either change your feeder and or change your seed. Now, I had a customer a couple weekends ago, and she said to me, I like having in my yard. Well, to me, that's a first. It's almost like, well, we love having squirrels in our yard. She liked having grackles because she said, I have not had one Japanese beetle in my yard since grackles have come in. They pick them off, they eat them, and they do eat mealworms. If you've got mealworms out, they're going to, again, go through that. And that's a pricey type of food that bluebirds love, robins love, but grackles and blackbirds and squirrels will also eat it. So a question on blue jays, and some people, because they're very loud and they scare the other birds away, a lot of people don't want them around. I really like them. And the reason is that blue jays have a tendency, they're in the corvid family, the Corvidae family, which is the family of crows. They have a ton of different vocalizations. Some people think that a train is coming through because they have that deep whistle. Others are that screech that they make. They can also mimic a red-shouldered hawk or a red-tailed hawk in the yard. It's just like a parrot. They can mimic it, which would tell other birds and also squirrels that there's a predator in the yard. So how do you get rid of jays? Well, I like jays in the yard, and I got one of these. And this little peanut wreath feeder here, to me, is so much fun. I've had so many customers that come in and tell me later, they go, oh, we could not believe how fun this is. And what you do is you fill this full of peanuts in the shell. And people say, well, how did they get it out of there? How can they pull that out of this, almost like a slinky? Well, that's the enrichment for them. And the reason that they do that is because they love peanuts in the shell. Now, is it messy? It's very messy, but they decompose. I mean, my neighbors are saying, oh my gosh, Bonnie, I got peanut shells all over. It is a bit of an eyesore, but you're not going to be growing peanuts in your yard, so I wouldn't even worry about that. When I put this out in the morning and I see maybe one blue jay, I end up getting anywhere from between 6 and 9 jays in the yard. They leave the feeders completely alone and they work on the peanuts. Now, the reason a lot of people don't like blue jays is because they do go into nests and they can eat the eggs. They can also kill the nestlings in there. That's very rare though, because they're more interested in the seed that you provide, insects. They have gone after some small mammals like mice or voles in the yard. So to me, I wouldn't really discourage blue jays. If you don't like them, again, it's part of changing the seed. Don't offer cracked corn. Offer safflower, strictly safflower. Even though some people say, well, you know, my cardinals don't like safflower, they will get used to it. People will say, feed strictly safflower and you won't get squirrels. I'm telling you, if squirrels are hungry enough, they're going to eat safflower. But it's a much bitter seed, and the fact that it's such a hard shell to crack, that's why you want to use safflower instead of sunflower seeds and instead of millet and instead of cracked corn. So for me, I encourage jays in my yard. I would tell anybody if they love the sound of them, alerting that there's a predator in the yard, if a cat's going through the yard, jays will tell you that. And they come in flocks, and I know the other birds get scared and they fly away, but mine are so used to it now because I've got this on a pole system. I've got the wreath feeder on a pole system. The jays completely leave my other feeders alone. So I would encourage anybody, if you enjoy jays or you just don't want to change your seed, get a wreath feeder and fill it full of peanuts in the shell. They'll love it. Yeah, so is there a bully bird season? There really is, and it's seasonal in the spring and summer. Mostly in the spring, it's a migratory bird. Grackles and blackbirds are going to come into your yard. Now, blackbirds are one of the first migratory birds back to the state, and it's always the males that come first. How do you distinguish a blackbird? The males are completely black. They're smaller than a grackle, and the males have the red shoulder patches or red epaulets on their shoulders. They will go into feeders, and again, if you have millet or cracked corn, they're going to just kick all of that out, and they'll just eat that down to nothing. Offer safflower, and then you're not going to have that issue. Or get a tube feeder with pegs, which they can't stand on, and then get Niger for it, which they don't like that seed. Do you live near a marsh or a wetland area or a pond or where there's any kind of wet area ponds? Yeah, I do. Or just across the street. Well, that's where they nest. So once the females come back, and the females are streaked, heavily streaked, and they're brown, all the males get the fancy colors. They get the duds, and we get nothing in the female bird world. Once the females come back, the males go back into the marsh areas. They look for nesting sites. And the sound of a blackbird is really, I can't do a very good imitation, but for many of you that have the Merlin app by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, it's a conkaree. It's a noise that they make, and it's very high pitched. And then when they're around other blackbirds, it's a check sound, check, 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 where they're talking to each other. But the conkaree sound that they make is because they've got other birds in the area. They're greeting them. They're waiting for the females to come back. But that's how you distinguish a blackbird. Also between the red epaulets, different from a grackle. Grackle's bigger, and grackles just have a tendency to screech a little bit more. So that's what a blackbird is like. And again, they're going to come in large flocks like grackles do. And during mid-season, I'm telling you, probably in the next week or so, blackbirds, you might get 1 or 2 at your feeder. And that's even if you use sunflower seeds or whatever, because now they're off in the marshes and they're nesting and there's insects available. And sometimes they even eat tiny frogs. So your feeders are quite safe in the summer from blackbirds. And then in September, the flocks are going to gather again and the feeders are going to get just raided. If you want, you can take that down during migratory season when they leave in September. But some people just feel really bad about that. So I would suggest, again, using safflower or tube feeders with Niger. The great thing about these suet feeders, whoops, and I brought one here. This is called an upside down feeder. And people are always asking, how in the world can a bird find this? Well, woodpeckers find it, nuthatches, chickadees find it, but it's really difficult for any kind of a grackle or a blackbird to find that. They can't hang upside down like the tree clinging birds do. So if you put a cake of suet in here, you're going to be good to go. If you want to use a bigger one, here we've got this one, and you can put a large cake in here so it lasts longer. And this is better for a pileated or some of the larger woodpeckers that need to balance their tails. This small one, they're not going to stay on very well because they're stiff tail feathers. They'll start to curve around it. That's why little suet cages don't work very well for the larger woodpeckers. If you're looking for a hairy woodpecker or a red belly or even the northern flicker, something like this would be the way you want to go because they can balance themselves a little bit better. Some people just use these during the spring migratory season, and then they go back to their regular suet feeder, which would be something like this. And again, I really recommend these types of feeders because, again, it's got the tail prop on it, where the larger woodpeckers, they can balance their tail feathers on the prop, and as they put their toes in here, then they can eat. So I don't like the little cages. When I first moved to my house, I got one of those little tiny cages, and a squirrel came up on the deck, and he unhooked it, and he dropped it to the ground, and he ran off with it, and that was 25 years ago, and I haven't seen it since. So squirrels love, they'll chew right through those metal cages. And again, you're not going to get the larger woodpecker. So I would highly recommend getting one that's got a tail prop. During migratory season, get an upside down one. And we offer these at Gertens. They're great. I've got one that's a log. It looks like a log. And we've got the vertical logs, but the horizontal one, you just stuff that with suet plugs and the birds find it right away. Now, grackles will occasionally jump up on a feeder like this if you've got and they'll jump and they'll grab a piece and then they'll drop to the ground. So they're not as grackle and blackbird safe as the upside down feeders are. So I would highly recommend, again, during spring, early summer, what we're going through right now is to get an upside down feeder. As far as one of my favorite feeders, and people know me, I swear by these things, it's called the Whipper. And this is created for the northern cardinal. And the reason I like this so much, little birds love it, but when a grackle goes on here, they wobble on these perches. So it's weight calibrated. So up to the weight of a cardinal, the Whipper works beautifully. The larger birds, they wobble on it. They don't like it. Even blue jays, I've seen them go on my Whipper and they don't last long at all on there. They're just wobbling. They feel unsafe there. So I love this feeder. I've had it for 7 years. The only damage I've had to it has been teeth marks on the cap. It's heavy, it's powder coated, heavy duty zinc die cast with a stainless steel handle, polycarbonate tube so it doesn't crack or yellow. And the great thing about it is that it's got a lifetime warranty against squirrel damage. So if a squirrel knocks it off your deck or off a pole and it cracks, you can have this for 10 years and you don't need a receipt. You just take a picture of it, send it to Droll Yankees, and in most cases you will get a new feeder. So it's truly a lifetime warranty. Invest the money on this if you've got squirrels. If you don't have squirrels, you don't need this feeder, but if you have squirrels, this is the only feeder that you need. And this one was designed for northern cardinals. That's why I love it. First 2 weeks, all I had were chickadees and nuthatches and little downies and house finches and goldfinches. And I thought, I've got 2 feeders for you guys. I want my cardinals. Takes a while for some birds to really find a feeder. If it's unusual looking, it's in their territory, they don't like it. Finally, after 2.5 weeks, I got my male cardinal. Yesterday, I had a rose-breasted grosbeak, and they are stunning. For, again, a migratory bird. If you've got the right seed for them, they love safflower. They could possibly nest in your yard. But in most cases, they start to move north, just like a lot of the warblers do. You'll probably notice that you don't see any juncos anymore. They're little snowbirds. It's always a bad sign when you see them in the fall because they're coming down. It means winter's on its way. That's why they're called snowbirds. And then in early March, April, we have juncos all around. They're little gray birds with a white little tuxedo look. They're gone now because they've all moved and it's warmer weather. So they're migrating. So that's the kind of feeder that I would suggest. And again, if you are worried about just putting safflower in there because your birds don't like the safflower, you can use our deluxe cardinal mix. I highly recommend it. It's got 4 ingredients in it. And those bigger birds, they can't stay on this. They wobble on it. Now, occasionally a red-winged blackbird, because it is about the weight of a cardinal, they might be able to sit on it. So I think it's really important that people really invest in a good feeder. And in Droll Yankees, I always consider it they're really the Rolls Royce of bird feeders. So I would highly recommend that kind of feeder. How should you hang this feeder? I've got mine because I thought I was going to be amused day and night. So I put a hook on my deck rail just so I could sit on my couch and watch the squirrels go up and down and fall into my mulch down below. They try it one time. I've had one squirrel that he went down into the mulch, and I thought, well, what's he doing down there with his little paws crossed? And he came right back up my deck thinking, I must have done something wrong, so I'm going to try this again. And sure enough, he sat on the cap, started to think how he was going to do it this time, maybe go a little bit slower, and down he went. And it's too wide for them to shimmy, so down he went. If you have mature trees, you are going to get squirrels. Now, how other people can hang it, my suggestion for people, instead of putting it on an S-hook, get a carabiner and it's more of a locking device, like on a dog leash, and then put that on your shepherd's hook or wherever you're going to do it. If you want to put it on a tree, go right ahead. It doesn't make any difference. They're going to do the same thing as they would on a pole system or on a hook on your deck rail. You can really put this anywhere you want. Some people say a squirrel, as they go down, sometimes their paw hooks onto the port, but they don't stay very long because they can't really hang on to anything after a while. And again, these food ports are so deep that some people have said when they bought this feeder, they've got problems with deer, and deer had their tendency to get their tongues into food ports. These are really deep food ports, so deer can't get that. And these don't clog very much in snow and in rain. However, I highly recommend, I was terrible about that until we had the avian flu last year. They're asking people to please rake up all the old seed under your feeder because there's droppings under there and birds can get salmonella. And then also clean out your feeder. Try and clean it out once every couple months. I use hot water and distilled vinegar. Leave it in there, soak it. If you have a large brush, just swoop it around. Then rinse it thoroughly. That's why I don't like to use bleach, because a lot of people don't rinse them thoroughly. Rinse it thoroughly with the hot water and distilled vinegar. Let it dry out and then put your seed back in there and you're good to go. So try and clean your feeders more often if you care about the birds. People hate to see a cardinal or any kind of a house finch where their eye have closed or they're losing feathers around their eye. It's a form of conjunctivitis that they get, and a lot of that is caused by when they're underneath feeders, they get sick. And you don't want to see birds suffer like that. If they don't have their eyesight, even one eye, they're going to be picked off by a Cooper's hawk or a sharpshin. Yeah, that's a really age-old question. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology and Audubon has now suggested to leave the egg in the nest. If you see an odd-colored egg and maybe 4 robin's eggs, leave that. Even though cowbirds, they're in the blackbird family, but so are orioles in the blackbird family. So not all these birds are bad or bully birds. But cowbirds are considered a parasitic bird. They love to be on farmlands. They're in farm fields, a lot of people, because they're eating the grain in farm fields. They like cracked corn, they like sunflower seeds, and they like millet. So again, there's a common theme going along here, that some of the inexpensive, more wasteful food that cardinals won't like, or a lot of the beautiful songbirds, the bully birds like. The reason they suggest leaving the egg, and nothing's worse than seeing a little chipping sparrow, which I love, feeding a huge baby cowbird, and there are no chipping sparrows around, because they've probably been, the baby cowbird gets all the food, because whoever's got their beak in the nest gets the food first, and birds don't know that. However, a lot of mother birds in the nest are very smart. They do an egg count. So if you remove that egg, that cowbird egg, the robins or finches, they may abandon the nest entirely and leave all the eggs in the nest. There's also called a mafia mobbing by cowbirds, which sounds really nasty, but if you remove the egg and a cowbird sees that, they may attack the eggs and just stab them to death, all the eggs, and just they will never hatch. So they suggest leaving the cowbird egg there, and that's nature. That's what the Cornell Lab of Ornithology said. Don't remove it, even though they are parasitic birds and very few people like them around. We're good to go. So if any of you have any questions, feel free to I can answer the questions online, or stop and see me. I'm only here on the weekends in the birding department, but I'll be happy to answer the questions to best of my ability. Thanks again.